Property is still a good investment. We work with a lot of investors. I think we just have to look at it differently. We can't approach investments in property the same way we did many, many years ago. You have to anticipate that something might be wrong and not be surprised when it happens. And when it happens, to be ready. I think that's where Xpello is really COVID, people realize anything can happen. A lot of people say, but you do proper screenings, you're never going to need it. Unfortunately, anything can happen in the future. So rather have something in place, speak to people, find out what's the options. But don't go ostrich approach and think it's never going to happen to me. It's too costly if it does. So continue to invest. It is a long-term good investment, but don't do it with ignorance.
Elize, thank you so much for joining us today for an episode on Real Talk SA. We're really, really happy to have you here. I just wanted to kick off by asking you to introduce yourself to the audience and the listeners. Just tell them a little bit about yourself and the company that you represent.
Thank you, Mia. Thank you for being here. I'm a qualified attorney practicing for 15, 20 years. And then we realized there's a need for people to have assistance when they go through an eviction. And that's how Xpello was established in 2017. So Xpello don't just take the worry out of evictions, they also do the breach management, which I think really helps.
And you're actually the second attorney we have in the seat today. So I love that. So today we're really going to be having a discussion about specifically property eviction management for rental properties in South Africa. So what would you say as our first discussion, just what are the legal steps involved in evicting a tenant in South Africa, and how long does that process normally take? Because I think there's a big misconception out there about what it actually is and what people think happens during that process.
Absolutely. So Xpello's got the luxury of working with 27 panel attorneys nationwide, and we see what happens in the different provinces. And every province is different. But average, you're looking at an eviction order, you get that in about 4 months, if you're lucky. And people say it takes forever, but that's actually a very fast time to get an eviction order. Otherwise, you're looking at about 6 months. And this is when the tenant doesn't even oppose it. So it means tenant doesn't contest it. You purely just follow the legal process and you get your order. I've heard of horrid stories where tenants fight it, and it takes up to 2 years to get an eviction order.
Sure.
So I think that's the process, and I think that's why it's so important to put a lot of things in place beforehand that you can try and prevent it. But if you do go through an eviction, do it properly and do it correctly.
Because there's also loss of income for the investor, or as we call them, landlords as well. And I don't think people realize that you can't just evict someone. There's a whole process to be followed. What would you say from your experience is some of the reasons why landlords end up using an eviction service like Xpello?
So I think the main reason and the most common is non-payment of rent. And the big problem with that is people are firstly living beyond their means. That's the most common thing we're seeing. People want to stay in that 25,000 Rand a month property. They don't want to go stay in a 12,000 Rand property. And people don't, they build a nice picture. People trust them just and allow them into the properties. So people aren't doing vetting as strict as they're supposed to. We see this often. Or they get blinded by promises and, money. Like, I'll pay you 4 months up front. And they go, yeah, let's take them. So I think people don't get trained. And I think that's why, especially from Xpello side, because we get involved from the beginning of the lease. We say, sign up with us in the beginning. And we see all the applications. And often we have to say, listen, did you have a look at the affordability? And because they think they can afford it, but there's a lot of things they don't even take into consideration.
I think even at our office, the vetting process is we're really, really strict. We would rather turn away a tenant because at the end of the day, if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. The not so nice thing that then happens if you do take on a tenant like that, it becomes your problem, and essentially the landlord that you represent or that you're helping with the management of that property. So our vetting process, we don't just take the credit check, we actually look at the bank statements. We spoke about it in a previous episode. Make sure that if they say they're earning 10,000 Rand a month, that is actually reflecting, on the bank statements. And I think that's really, really important. What do you think, people can do to prevent this? I know there's some of the public use rental agencies, but others also do it themselves. So what would be your advice to the public on how they could actually prevent this from happening?
So I think the first thing I want to say is please don't try and save money because it's going to cost you at the end. So ideally, Xpello is very pro using an agent because we know that the work that goes into vetting. So from our side, to draw a credit report is not vetting. Okay, we've seen people that we work with that's got very bad credit scores, but they're fantastic tenants because affordability is there. So I think if you ideally can, especially if you're new to the business, rather use an agent and ask the right questions. Make sure, get the reports, ask about affordability, ask that they go through the bank statements. If you're going to do it, even if you don't want your agent to manage it, at least get an agent just to do the placements. A lot of people don't know they have the option of just getting an agent to place a tenant for them, let them do the vetting, and then you manage it yourself. And so that's the first thing. If you really want to do it yourself, at least go onto the platforms that you can get a proper credit report. Don't do vetting on just looking at the person. I mean, I'm a property investor myself, and I burn my fingers that way. Very arrogant. I mean, I'm an attorney. I do evictions. I know how to handle it. I didn't do proper vetting, and it bit me. So rather, especially in the beginning, rather get your agent to help you with it. Go to a platform that does the vetting part and full vetting. And vetting entails bank statements, salary slips, 3 months minimum, and verify the details. Please, people. I think that's so vital.
Verification of the details is so important. I mean, we would phone the employer, that's on the salary slip. Do this person actually work there? Is this their gross salary or whatever it is? Because that sometimes can be fraudulently, amended as well. So I think that's really important. And can you tell us how eviction landscape has changed in the recent years, especially after COVID-19?
So I do say I think people were very patient during COVID, and I think the patience has gotten up a bit. So people aren't as patient and forgiving now. But I think the biggest impact actually on evictions is Google. This is going to sound very strange, but people are more entitled to their rights. They know how to delay the whole process because most of the evictions we deal with, the tenants don't have a defense, but they know how to delay the process and they get this information from the internet. And that integrity, we would rather work with the tenant, help them. From Xpello side, if we evict, we have gone through extremes. We offer tenants to help them to vacate. We help them with the move, all of this. So if we need to evict you through the legal process, it means you've really been obstructive. And they just really try and Google and see how they can delay the process, causing harm.
Because there is so much that happens before the actual eviction. They get a lot of chances. Do you maybe just want to talk us through some of those little steps?
So the first step of the whole process is your letter of demand. And as most lease agreements are fixed terms, you usually have to give them 20 business days, which is technically a month to remedy the breach. So this is the time where especially Xpello used all of this to mediate, solve the problem. Why, if you lost your job, you most probably not going to be able to pay your rent next month, never mind this month. How can we help you to move? And that's where you send the letters and you have to show the courts. The courts are coming and saying, we are overflowing, so you need to try and resolve it. After the 20 days, if it cannot be settled, you then cancel the lease agreement and then an application is drafted, issued out of the court, and the courts then serve that on the tenants and on the municipality. So that's why evictions are so expensive, because it's not just dealing with the tenant, you're dealing with the municipality as well. And then a normal court process, you have your initial documents and your court date, but an eviction, the government said, listen, this is a human rights issue. So you have an interim application as well. So I laugh and I call it the monopoly notice. So the people that don't know about monopoly sort of says it's a reminder. So you have to bring an application where you say to the court, I've served my application. All the documents is in order. I'm not going to tell the tenant again. And then you authorize this notice, basically going to the tenant saying, I want to evict you. You have to be at court. If you're not at court, we are going to get the order, and we can actually come and throw you out of the property. So it's this type of notice which is then have to be served again. So even if you used, and when we deal with the best attorneys nationwide, I really vet them properly. If you go through this whole process, even with the shortcut service urgently, if you can get your order within 3 months, I mean, that is very quick. But I mean, we are dependent on the courts. Load shedding has an impact. I mean, that has been crazy. KZN with the floods had an impact. So there's so many volatile things. And I think from our side, even being an attorney arguing evictions myself, you can only trust the system to be that fast. That's why it's so imperative to do things to prevent that eviction legally. Yeah. I want to add that, Mia, because people take the law into their own hands and it backfires. People know too much of their rights these days, and it's going to come and it's going to cost you more money.
No, I think it's important for people to know and to be educated. And I agree. Google is an amazing tool, but also people use it sometimes to the disadvantage of others. So that brings us to just discussing a little bit about the rights of the landlord and the tenant during an eviction, because I think sometimes, especially as an agent, and we have an agency, you feel like you're a little bit in the middle. So maybe you can just elaborate a little bit about the rights of both the landlord and then the tenant in that eviction process.
Okay, so I think that is absolutely, I feel very sorry for the agents, and we try to keep them updated. From a landlord side, they're entitled to get their property back as soon as possible. It's actually very easy to prove that you're entitled to an eviction order. You have to be the owner, and you have to be, the tenant should be an illegal occupation. There's one thing, I think it's a very sensitive topic, is electricity. Landlords want to go and cut it. They are not allowed to instruct the municipality to cut. It comes down to spoliation, because the court says that's your way to try and force the tenant to vacate. Even I see a trend where people, they take the access to the estates. They go cancel that. You can't do it. You can't prevent your tenant from going back. So basically, landlord, your rights are there. Get an attorney, enforce it. Don't take the law into your own hands. Tenant is there, on the other hand. You cannot be illegally evicted, but you have to know you're going to be held liable. And I want to say that the landlords and the industry is taking a stance. They're starting to know things. In the past, you could have been evicted and nobody would even know. Now we're noting those things, and it's going to prejudice you. I want to say to a tenant, yes, you're entitled to alternative accommodation, but it's not the landlord's obligation. It's not the landlord's obligation, especially in your rental agreements. Those rights that is set out in the PI Act is for the really destitute people, the people that's in your squatter camps. Yeah. They don't have alternatives. You said you had affordability to rent a place. Now you have to move. So I think that is, the system is there. It's not in favor of one or the other. If you follow the system correctly, it will be heard. And I think that is quite fair. And I think that's the important part.
And I think with the law, it will always be in favor of both parties as well. So how does Xpello ensure legal compliance, would you say?
So I think this is where we have a big benefit for the agents and the landlords. An agent gets, and I mean, there's so much that you do. Ask me about certain things, I don't know. I mean, inspection, we don't. But with the letter of demand, we check to make sure the letter of demand contains everything. Make sure the landlords, the parties are set out correctly, the time periods are correctly done. So we make sure the process is followed correctly. And then I think the biggest other value, attorneys are very, very expensive, unfortunately. So with Xpello clients, they don't have that expense of having to pay for the eviction, because Xpello will pay the eviction. So that's the one benefit. The other benefit, what I've realized, is we don't always understand attorneys. Attorneys get educated, they want to talk very fancy because they want to charge. Now we go and we break it down. So our clients never see the attorney. They don't have to speak to the attorney. We come and we take that information, and we are there every step of the way, explaining it, if we need to 10 times, that the owner knows. Because as an investor yourself, it's an emotional thing. I almost compare it to a divorce. And the reason why it's so emotional is because you trusted something with something very valuable, a property, and somebody broke that trust. It's not just about money. And if you don't have somebody that says, listen, I'm on your side, because even if you have, there's nothing more frustrating telling an attorney telling a client, but that's the court date, or that's how the law is. You need somebody to go, it's unfair, it's not right. But you know what? We're going to get the best things we can for you. And I think that's the value that Xpello wants to bring. I mean, we've paid tenants to vacate, not because we're in favor of the tenants, but if that solves the problem quickly. We had a tenant left their mother behind.
Sure.
I mean, how do you vacate and leave your mother behind? Luckily, we heard she was in a registered for old age home. We paid the old age home. We moved the mother out of the property. That was much faster, and the owner can get somebody in, because like you said correctly, if you start with the eviction process, people don't pay. Nobody's going to pay the rent. And the bank is not going to go, oh, you don't have to pay me your bond while your tenant doesn't pay.
We wish they would, but it doesn't work like that.
No. So the bond, you still need to pay the bond. So that pressure, we try to solve that problem as soon as possible.
I think I often speak about it in the episodes that we're dealing with people's emotions, and I think it's really good that through Xpello, you guys have created a way where you can actually assist. Not just from a legal compliance and paperwork point of view, but also almost holding someone's hand through that process, which is really great. I wanted to just know, do you think it differs from province to province? I get a lot of clients saying to us, but how can you say that we can't evict, our tenant until they've got somewhere else to live, another place? Is that kind of the same across the board, no matter which province you're in? Because I know you also spoke about the municipality that you need to be, that needs to be involved.
So I'm going to have to get a bit technical here.
Yes.
So throughout the country has got the same act. So the act says that if a tenant is in illegal occupation for less than 6 months, you purely have to inform the municipality, okay, that you're starting the process. If they're illegal for more than 6 months, then the municipality have to get involved and determine if alternative accommodation should be, be given. So that's why I say, firstly, you never ever want to cancel if you can't proceed with an eviction, because if you get the municipality involved on that level, it's going to delay the whole process. All provinces, yes. Cape Town, in certain instances, they will go, if it's on a month-to-month basis, you have to give somebody a month's notice. In Joburg, up to recently, no, if it's on a month-to-month basis, 7 days cancel, you need to be out immediately. But throughout, the standard will go, yes, the order is granted. What will be just and equitable for them to vacate? The standard is a month. I mean, we had an instance where the court did give them two weeks to vacate, which we were happy about, but it was a single person. You understand? It was a small, it's easy to pack up. If you have an extended family and you need to pick up, you can't expect those people to pick up in 2 weeks. And then we had instances where there was a disabled person, and the courts gave them 2 months to vacate. We weren't happy, but that was the circumstances. So I think the courts, when we did the judges' trading as well, beneficial, you deal with human rights. And they go and assess. It's a terrible time to evict during December. Nobody's going to evict a family over Christmas. You're never going to evict somebody if there's a grade 12 and they're writing exams, because the court is going to think, I'm going to prejudice that child. So the human factor is there. It's not just about money. And I think that has an impact on the different courts in different provinces. A landlord does not have the obligation to find alternative accommodation. The court might just afford them more time to vacate.
Because I think that's a big misconception out there. If you don't mind, I want to use an example of a recent situation that we've had. So the tenant, this is in Cape Town, just to add, the tenant had the lease agreement in her name. She has paid 4 months rent up front, which is another thing that we don't really like. Paid 4 months up front. Just to mention, it's not someone that's with our agency. It was with another agency, but she's asked our advice. And then she left the property. She paid her 4 months rent up front. The lease is supposed to end now in the end of May. She vacated the property, but had someone else live there with her. Now that person is refusing to move out. So I'd love to know your input on that, because they're not legally on the lease, but she allowed them to stay there. Whether they sublet it and no one knew about it, our advice to them was to get an attorney's opinion and not take matters in their own hands. And secondly is to not allow something like this to happen again, and rather work through a reputable agency, and do your proper vetting. But I thought that was such an interesting scenario because the tenant is left. She's paid up her rent for the time that the lease was. Now there's another person in that property. What would your suggestion be in a case like that?
Mia, I actually see a lot of tenants think that the moment they vacate, they are free of all obligations. That person got occupation through them. So my first stop will be that tenant that vacated to tell them, I'm going to hold you liable for my loss of income as long as that person is in there. Because if you put pressure on the tenant who knows this person, hopefully they can get them out. That sometimes have a lot of more pull. If that doesn't work, we usually would rather than work with that tenant to get our eviction order quickly. Say, listen, by agreement, everybody should vacate. That's another way to do. But I think people should almost be very wary. Make sure who's the occupants. Because especially in Cape Town, we've seen a lot of people, the tenants aren't even from the beginning occupying the property, and those are the ones that we're struggling with. So if that ever comes to your attention, ask, in the lease agreement, who's the occupants? If the occupants and the tenants aren't the same, that should actually raise
a red flag.
A red flag.
Because I've seen now that in lease agreements, they actually ask for a list of occupants and their ID numbers and a copy of their IDs. And I think that's just to cover your bases as well. I wanted to also ask you, if someone wanted to sign up for Xpello, does it have to be through an agency, or can the public also sign up directly with you guys?
Public can come to us directly as well.
Okay.
They can go to our website and all our contact details are on there, and they can reach out. The most important thing is we are not a managing agent, because people do get that confused. But that's why we work with agencies. They send out the letter of demands and they manage the rental statements. And people sort of underestimate the value of that sometimes. But if you don't have it, I say all properties that's being leased out must have something in place. An eviction can cost anything between 20 and 100,000 rand. Most landlords don't have the money for an attorney. Before an attorney works, they want a deposit, anything between 5 and 10,000 rand. If you don't get your rent and you have to pay a bond, you don't have that money. So please have at least something in place. Reach out to our office, go to our website. Our team is there to support and guide.
We've recently actually used Xpello to assist a landlord, and it was, I think, a big relief on their side that it was all dealt with. I love the idea of doing it early on before you get to that past 6 months stage, and now it's a much bigger problem. So that was a really good experience for us and that landlord. So thank you for that as well. I wanted to know what advice you can give to landlords to better screen tenants to avoid costly eviction scenarios down the line. So I know we already touched a little bit on, your credit checks and that, but is there anything else you can add, to that, to just give landlords advice on that?
So ideally, I want to say, firstly, if you go with an agent, vet your agent. We work with you guys. We know your standard. But there's some agents out there that doesn't know what they're doing and they think rentals are easy. So if you're comfortable, or get a referral of an agent, if they know what they're doing, then get all the information from the agent. Don't just be blinded by money. Rather let your property be empty for one more month to get a correct tenant than grabbing the first one, because it's much harder to get somebody out than placing a tenant. And I think that's the more valuable thing. People don't, and I know some agents get offense when I go, but they should actually ask you questions. Can you do the job?
Yes.
But unfortunately, we in the work that you need to go and see who can do the job, who knows about rentals. It's not just the ones of sale. Take the time, make sure who you work with, how they work with. It is a lot of paperwork, but read it. Because otherwise people don't know what to expect. When I leased out my property as well, you sort of want to skim through everything and then later on you want to think about it. No, read, know what's going on, ask the questions, take the time.
No, I think that's such great advice. And if people wanted to reach out to yourself or to Xpello for any advice, where would be the best place for them to get hold of you and to contact you?
All our details are on our website. www.xpello, and I just want to say this, everybody puts an E before the X.
So only an X.
So it's the X factor, so xpello.co.za. send us an email. We've got a chat on there, and we will reply as soon as possible. And the reason why I say that's the easy way is because then we have a whole team on it.
Yes.
Because we want to give feedback as soon as possible. And our website is full of information. We believe information is power. Similar to you guys, it's doing an amazing job. So let's educate and help.
Thank you so much. Before we come to a close, I wanted to just ask if there was anything else you wanted to share with the audience, and the listeners about how you've become successful over the last few years in your business and the role that you've played in helping people, and just anything else, any last words of wisdom you'd like to leave with them.
Thank you, Mia. I think I want to end off and say property is still a good investment. We work with a lot of investors. I think we just have to look at it differently. We can't approach investments in property the same way we did many, many years ago. You have to anticipate that something might be wrong and not be surprised when it happens. And when it happens, to be ready. I think that's where Xpello is really COVID, people realize anything can happen. A lot of people say, but you do proper screenings, you're never going to need it. Unfortunately, anything can happen in the future. So rather have something in place, speak to people, find out what's the options. But don't go ostrich approach and think it's never going to happen to me. It's too costly if it does. So continue to invest. It is a long-term good investment, but don't do it with ignorance.
Well, thank you so much for all that valuable advice. It was lovely to have you here, and I'm sure we'll have you back for another episode because, like I said, there is really a lot to talk about, especially with this. I think it's a hot topic at the moment, and probably will be forevermore. But thank you so much for your advice and expertise. We really, really appreciate it.
Mia, thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you for all the education that you guys are putting out there. It's amazing and much needed.
Thank you.